Welcome to the deep dive. Ever thought about those hidden parts of yourself? Maybe not just the little quirks, but, the real Mr. Hyde stuff. Or even, like, surprising strengths you don't quite own.
That's exactly what we're digging into today. We're tackling Carl Jung's concept of the shadow and, importantly, the whole process of what's called shadow work integration, our plan. We've gathered a whole lot of reports, articles, research, and we're boiling it down for you. A shortcut, really, to understanding this pretty complex psychological idea. We'll look at where the shadow comes from, how it shows up day to day, some practical ways to, engage with it, and crucially, what actually happens when you do this work. The good stuff, the benefits, but also, let's be clear, the real risks involved.
Yeah, absolutely. By the end of this deep dive, the idea is you'll have a better sort of map of your inner world. This isn't just abstract theory, right? It's about getting some deep practical insights, understanding yourself, maybe your reactions, your relationships a bit better, and hopefully without feeling like you're drowning in psych speak. Okay, so let's start mapping this out. Jung saw the psyche as, well, not simple, more like a huge landscape, right? Like a massive ocean. And only this tiny island is what we're consciously aware of. So maybe you can start us off. What exactly is this island and what's under the water?
Right. That island is what Jung called the ego. It's the center of our conscious world, our sense of I. It's got our willpower, our identity. It's basically the manager running the daily show. And here's where it gets really interesting. The ego is constantly making decisions. What's acceptable, what's not? What do we embrace about ourselves? What do we push away? And those decisions are absolutely fundamental to how the shadow gets formed. It's like the ego's the bouncer at the club of consciousness.
Okay, the bouncer. I like that. So the ego's curating our identity,
Yeah.
but then there's this public face we put on too.
Like persona.
Yeah.
Exactly. The persona. To get by in the social world, the ego develops this mask. The word actually comes from the Latin for an actor's mask. It's the polished version of ourselves we present. What we want to be, what we want others to see. It's got all the traits we think are good or desirable. Maybe polite, generous, competent, like your best Instagram profile, but like in real life.
Right, the highlight reel. So we polish this persona, but what's the downside? What gets left out?
Well, think about it. For every quality you choose for that mask, say, being super agreeable, the opposite quality, maybe assertiveness or even righteous anger, gets set aside, pushed away. And the more rigid, the more perfect we try to make that persona, the bigger and darker and honestly more volatile the shadow behind it becomes. It helps explain those moments when someone with a seemingly flawless image just erupts. Shocking behavior. It's often the shadow, which has grown too powerful, finally bursting through.
Wow. Okay, so beneath the ego island and the persona mask, there's this vast unconscious. And Jung, he made a really key distinction within that unconscious, didn't he? Can you break down those layers for us?
He did, yeah. It's not just one big soup down there. First, there's the personal unconscious. This layer is unique to you. It holds all your specific experiences, memories, desires, impulses, everything that's been repressed, forgotten, ignored, usually because it was too painful or shameful or it threatened the ego's self-image or it just wasn't socially okay. This is the main storage locker for your personal shadow.
Okay, so that's unique to me, but then there's something deeper.
Exactly. Deeper still is the collective unconscious. This isn't personal, it's universal, shared by all humans. It's like an inheritance from our evolutionary past. And it's made up of what Jung called archetypes, these primal, universal patterns and images. Things like the mother archetype, the hero, and crucially for our chat today, the shadow archetype itself.
So the shadow isn't just my personal baggage. It's also this deeper universal pattern. It sounds way more complex than just the dark side.
Oh, much more. That's a really important point. It's easy to think of it as just the bad stuff, but Jung's idea of the shadow archetype is way richer. At its heart, the shadow is everything you refuse to acknowledge about yourself. All those qualities, impulses, experiences, the ego has said, nope, not me too. So if your persona is who you consciously think you are, the shadow is everything you're convinced you are not. It's the other living inside you.
And when does this whole process start, this pushing things away? Is it something we do as adults?
No, it starts much, much earlier, right back in early childhood. As kids, we're just trying to survive and get our needs met, right? Safety, love, belonging. So we adapt. The traits that get praised, maybe being quiet or helpful, they go into the persona. But the traits that get punished or shamed, things like anger, fear, selfishness. But also, this is key, even things like unbridled joy, spontaneity, creativity, if those weren't okay in our environment, they get suppressed. And that suppressed material forms the foundation of your personal shadow.
Okay, so there's the obvious dark shadow, the stuff we typically think of, the Mr. Hyde aspect. We all kind of recognize that, right?
Yeah, the dark shadow. That's the most familiar part. It holds those primitive, negative, socially frowned upon impulses: rage, envy, greed, lust, the drive for power. Jung called it the part of us that's inferior and guilt-laden. And yeah, it can erupt destructively when our conscious control, our ego, is weakened or tired. It's the raw stuff.
But you mentioned earlier, and this really caught my attention, that positive qualities can end up in the shadow too. That seems counterintuitive. How does that work?
It's a hugely important point, and often missed. The shadow isn't just negative. It also contains really positive, valuable, life-giving qualities. These are sometimes called your hidden treasures or the golden shadow. This could be things like assertiveness, maybe strong creative urges, spontaneity, vulnerability, unique talents you have. Maybe they got shamed when you were a kid. Stop showing off. Or artists don't make money in this family. Or maybe you just felt unworthy of your own gifts, so you pushed them away. The golden shadow is like this dormant life force, your unrealized potential just waiting down there. It's the brilliance you haven't let yourself claim.
Wow. Okay, so the shadow isn't just one thing. It's personal, shaped by my life, but it also connects to these bigger collective patterns.
Exactly. You've got your personal shadow, totally unique to you, built from your specific experiences, your family, your culture. Like maybe your shadow holds repressed anger from a super strict upbringing, while someone else's might hold repressed artistic talent because they were ridiculed for it. But then, layered onto that, is the collective shadow.
And that's the societal level, the stuff a whole culture pushes away.
Precisely. The collective shadow is the darkness an entire society or group refuses to see in itself. It holds the traits that the group labels as immoral or taboo. And this collective shadow doesn't just stay abstract. It manifests in big, real-world ways. Racism, sexism, xenophobia, the kind of thinking that justifies war. It's the psychological root of how we dehumanize others. The in-group projects its own unacknowledged darkness onto an out-group.
And these two levels, personal and collective, they're not separate silos, are they? They must feed into each other.
Oh, absolutely. They're deeply intertwined. Think of it as a continuum. What a culture deems taboo, what it represses collectively, strongly influences what individuals feel they have to repress personally. Take, for example, a culture that really discourages men from showing emotional vulnerability. That collective norm inevitably leads to individual men pushing their own vulnerability deep into their personal shadow. It shows how tackling big societal issues actually requires a kind of collective shadow work, too. It's fascinating how the big picture shapes our inner landscape. So if we zoom back into daily life, this unintegrated shadow isn't just sitting there quietly, it's actively influencing us. And the main way it does that is through something called projection.
Ah, projection. Okay, we hear that word thrown around a lot, but in this Jungian context, what does it really mean? How does it work with the shadow?
Right. Projection is basically when you unconsciously take your own unacceptable or disowned qualities, the stuff in your shadow, and you attribute them to someone else, or even a whole group. Jung had this great quote, something like, "You're fooled by the illusions when you see everything you're not conscious of in yourself coming at you from other people." It's essentially your ego's defense mechanism. It's easier to see a flaw out there in someone else than to face the painful truth that it might actually be inside you. Like pointing a finger, but three fingers are pointing back.
So it's a defense. But you also mentioned it could be like a clue. That seems like a paradox. How can it be both? How do we spot it?
That's the really useful, though tricky part. While projection is a defense, it's also an incredibly powerful diagnostic tool. Your unconscious actually wants this hidden stuff to be known. But since the ego won't look inward, the unconscious projects the shadow outward to grab your attention. The clearest sign. A really strong, disproportionate, emotionally charged reaction to someone else's behavior. That intense irritation, disgust, maybe moral outrage. Those feelings are like little flashing arrows, personal quest markers, pointing directly at the specific shadow stuff you most need to look at and integrate. So if you have a really visceral reaction to someone you see as arrogant, that's an invitation. Look at your own relationship with pride or maybe hidden insecurity.
And this works for both the dark stuff and the golden stuff. We project both.
Absolutely. Negative projection is the more common one we recognize. We see our own disowned selfishness or laziness or cruelty in other people.
Yeah.
This leads to that pattern of chronic judgment, blaming others, lots of conflict. It stops us from owning our own part in things. But we also do positive projection, sometimes called projecting the light.
That's when we put someone on a pedestal.
Yes.
Like intense admiration.
Spot on. idealization, admiration, sometimes even infatuation. You might see a teacher, a mentor, maybe a romantic partner as having this incredible creativity or confidence or wisdom. But here's the kicker. When you do that, you often fail to recognize that those very qualities you admire so much out there actually exist as dormant potentials inside yourself. This positive projection keeps you from owning your own power, your own brilliance. It can lead to unhealthy dependency or, eventually, massive disillusionment when the person inevitably falls off the pedestal. It's like outsourcing your own potential.
Okay, understanding the theory, the ego, the persona, projection, that's one thing. But the real power, you're saying, is in actually integrating the shadow. And it's not about getting rid of the shadow, right? It's about embracing it, making yourself whole.
Exactly. Integration isn't about achieving perfection by cutting out the bad parts. It's about becoming whole by embracing all the parts. It means bringing those unconscious shadow aspects, the dark and the gold, into your conscious awareness, accepting them, and then finding constructive ways to work with their energy. The aim isn't to kill the shadow, but to build a conscious relationship with it. Suppression, just pushing it down. That's what creates the problem in the first place. It strengthens the shadow, gives it autonomous power down there in the dark where it can eventually erupt.
Right, and that ties back to that powerful Jung quote. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So an unintegrated shadow is basically running the show behind the scenes.
Pretty much. It's not dormant. It's
Okay.
actively shaping your behavior, coloring your perceptions, dictating your emotional reactions, often without you even realizing it. Think of it like hidden programming running in the background. Integration is the process of bringing that programming to light, seeing it, understanding it, and then crucially reclaiming ownership,
Yeah.
moving from being unconsciously driven to making conscious choices. That's real freedom.
And this integration, it's a core part of what Jung called individuation, that whole lifelong journey.
Yes, exactly. For Jung, shadow integration isn't just a helpful exercise. It's an essential stage in this lifelong journey he called individuation. Individuation is the process of becoming a psychologically whole, distinct, authentic individual, separate from the collective, true to yourself. It involves reconciling all the opposing forces within your psyche, especially that core tension between the conscious ego and the unconscious shadow. Jung didn't mince words about it. He called the encounter with the shadow a tight passage, a narrow door. He said, it's painful constriction no one is spared if they want to truly grow. It's a tough but necessary rite of passage towards self-realization.
Okay, it sounds intense. So how do we actually do it? It feels profound, maybe a bit daunting. What are the actual practices? What does engaging the shadow look like day to day?
That's the critical question, isn't it? Moving from theory to practice. And you're right, it requires real effort. It's not a quick fix. Engaging with the shadow involves specific ongoing disciplines. And they demand, well, courage, definitely patience, humility, and a good dose of self-compassion. One really invaluable tool is journaling and reflective writing. It gives you a safe, private container to explore your inner world. It helps bypass the ego's usual defenses and lets unconscious stuff surface. A great technique is free writing, sometimes called morning pages, which Julia Cameron made popular. The idea is just write, say, 3 pages by hand first thing in the morning, whatever comes into your head. No censoring, no trying to make it sound good, just a brain dump.
That sounds freeing, actually, just letting it flow without judgment.
It really can be. Another way is using prompts for a more focused approach. You could ask yourself things like, what qualities in other people really push my buttons negatively? Or what was I praised for in my family? What was I punished or shamed for? Or maybe, what recurring self-sabotaging patterns do I keep falling into? What am I most terrified of others finding out about me? And then looking back over your journal entries over time, that helps you spot recurring themes, triggers, limiting beliefs. That's the shadow's influence becoming visible.
And dreams. Jung was huge on dreams, wasn't he? How do they fit in?
Well, absolutely central. He called dreams the royal road to the unconscious. They offer these direct symbolic messages from deep within. And the shadow shows up in dreams all the time, often as like a threatening figure or someone you despise, or maybe just an inferior version of yourself, usually the same sex as you, the dreamer. So step 1 is dream recording. You got to write them down immediately when you wake up, or they just evaporate.
So if I dream about some shady character following me, that might be my shadow.
It absolutely could be. In Jungian symbolic interpretation, the key idea is that every element in your dream represents an aspect of your own psyche. So that scary figure, that rival, that monster, you explore it as a potential part of you that you disowned. You ask, what part of me does this figure represent? And if you have recurring dreams or figures, pay extra attention. That's usually the unconscious really trying hard to get a message through about something significant and unresolved.
That's fascinating, like getting messages from your own depth. Are there ways to interact with these inner figures more directly while awake?
Yes, there is. It's a core Jungian technique called active imagination. It's kind of like dreaming with your eyes open.
Mm.
It's about establishing a direct, conscious dialogue with these autonomous figures or parts from your unconscious. You find a quiet space, maybe focus on a powerful image from a dream, or even just a strong mood you're feeling. Let that image or feeling take on a life of its own in your mind's eye.
And then you talk to it, like actually have a conversation.
Exactly. You engage in dialogue. You can ask it questions. Who are you? What do you want from me? What message do you have? You need to be an active participant, but also an observer. And it's really helpful to write the dialogue down as it happens. The goal is to shift from just analyzing yourself intellectually, a monologue, to actually having a dialogue where your conscious ego humbly listens to the other voices within. It can be incredibly profound.
Wow. Okay. And what about those moments in everyday life when something just sets you off, those big emotional reactions? Are those useful too?
Hugely useful. Your strongest emotional triggers are like direct portals to unintegrated shadow material. Learning to work with them in real time is a really powerful method. So when you get hit by one of those strong, disproportionate reactions, the first step is to pause. Just observe the reaction without judging yourself for having it. Note the thoughts flying around, the feelings, and really pay attention to the bodily sensations. Is your chest tight? Stomach in knots? Jaw clenched?
Okay, notice it. Then what? Ask why it hit so hard.
Exactly. Inquire into the why. Ask, why did that specific thing provoke such an intense response in me? What underlying belief or vulnerability or old wound just got poked? And often the intensity of a present-day trigger has roots in the past, so try to trace the roots. Does this feeling connect back to earlier experiences, maybe from childhood, where a similar emotion was shamed or ignored or linked to feeling unsafe? This really highlights that integration isn't just a mental exercise, it's an embodied process. Repressed emotions get stored in the body. So true integration means actually feeling that energy and finding conscious, healthy ways to channel or express it. That's why things like, say, martial arts for anger or maybe painting for repressed creativity can be so effective.
This sounds like incredibly deep work. Challenging, as Yoon said. But let's talk about the payoff. If someone commits to this tight passage, what's on the other side? What are the real benefits that make this tough journey worthwhile?
You're right, it's demanding. But the rewards, the harvest of integration, can be genuinely transformative across so many parts of life. They are substantial. Psychologically and emotionally, first off, you gain hugely enhanced self-awareness and authenticity. You start to understand your real motivations, your fears, your desires much more clearly. That allows you to live more consciously, more authentically, less driven by self-deception. It also brings much greater emotional balance and regulation. When you integrate the shadow, those unconscious triggers lose a lot of their power. There's less internal conflict, and you're better able to manage your emotions thoughtfully instead of just reacting. And, maybe most profoundly, facing and accepting all of yourself, the good and the bad, is a powerful antidote to shame and self-judgment. It fosters a deeper, more stable sense of self-esteem and self-compassion.
So it changes your relationship with yourself. Does it also change how you relate to other people?
Massively. Relationally, the benefits are huge. When you start owning your shadow projections, you stop unconsciously dumping your disowned stuff onto others. This means you can finally see people more clearly, more realistically for who they are, not just as screens for your projections. This leads to improved relationships, more empathy, better communication, much more genuine connection. And related to that, understanding the darkness within yourself naturally cultivates enhanced compassion for others. You become less judgmental of their shadows because you recognize your own. You see them as whole people fighting their own battles.
That makes a lot of sense. If you're grappling with your own inner stuff, you're probably less likely to point fingers. What about areas like creativity or even just personal effectiveness?
Big impacts there too, especially when you integrate the golden shadow, that repository of repressed creativity, talent, and vitality. Doing that liberates creativity and potential. It unlocks new sources of inspiration, allows for fuller self-expression, and confronting your inner darkness, paradoxically, uncovers hidden strengths. This self-knowledge builds personal empowerment and resilience. It gives you the clarity and courage to make life choices that are truly aligned with who you are, to pursue goals, to overcome obstacles. There are even documented cases, like an athlete I read about who was in a slump, engaged with his shadow, and then started setting personal bests. It's like accessing this untapped fuel source within. But And this is a big but. We have to be really clear. This descent into the psychic depths, it's not without serious challenges and potential dangers. It's absolutely not a journey to take lightly. Jung himself, remember, called his own self-exploration hellish.
Okay, let's talk about those risks. What are some of the immediate dangers? It sounds like it could really shake someone up.
It certainly can, emotionally and psychologically. Just uncovering repressed material can be incredibly destabilizing. You can get hit with a flood of really powerful, painful emotions. Shame, grief, rage that you've maybe kept locked away for decades. That's emotional overwhelm. And a really significant danger, especially for anyone with a history of trauma, is re-traumatization. Trying to confront deep shadow material, especially trauma-related stuff, without proper professional support, that can lead to flooding, where you basically re-experience the raw, emotional, and physiological state of the original trauma, which is not healing. It's harmful.
That sounds serious. What happens if someone dives in too deep, too fast, maybe without a strong enough sense of self to handle it?
That leads to other risks. If the ego isn't stable or strong enough, directly encountering powerful archetypal energies from the unconscious can cause what Jung called inflation. This is where the ego gets overwhelmed and identifies with the archetype. It can lead to feelings of grandiosity, like you're chosen or special, maybe paranoia, a messianic complex, basically a dangerous loss of touch with reality and human limitations. Jung also warned about the shadow actually possessing the personality, especially if the ego is weak or confused. The primitive impulses of the shadow just take over and dictate actions. The person ends up, as Jung put it, always standing in his own light and falling into his own traps. That's why integration must be led by the conscious ego. Dr. Jekyll needs to integrate Mr. Hyde, not the other way around.
Okay, those are some heavy psychological risks. What about the more practical, everyday challenges someone might face doing this work?
Good question. On a practical level, first, progress can be slow and difficult. Shadow work is definitely a marathon, not a sprint. It's long-term, often arduous, there are no real shortcuts, and progress isn't usually linear. There can be setbacks. Also, as you change through integrating your shadow, becoming more authentic, maybe more assertive, you might encounter resistance from others, friends, family, partners. They were used to your old persona, your old patterns. Your transformation can disrupt those dynamics, leading to confusion or conflict. It's sometimes called an integration hangover. And there's more subtle risk too, action faking. It's possible to get really caught up in the activities of shadow work journaling, analyzing dreams, reading books, and use it as a sophisticated form of procrastination. You can spend ages working on your shadow intellectually without actually making tangible changes in your behavior or your life. It creates the illusion of progress while you avoid the real-world vulnerability of actually being different.
It strikes me, listening to all this, there's a real paradox at the heart of it. It sounds like gaining real control actually involves consciously letting go of control. Can you unpack that a bit?
That's a fantastic insight. And yes, it's a core paradox. The ego, in its desperate attempt to maintain complete control by suppressing the shadow, is actually being unconsciously controlled by it. It's like trying to hold that beach ball underwater. It takes constant effort, creates tension, and eventually the repressed energy will find a way to erupt, often unexpectedly. By courageously choosing to relinquish that illusion of total control, by facing the shadow, by engaging with it consciously, that's when you gain the awareness needed for true conscious choice. Real power doesn't come from defeating or eliminating the shadow, but from forming a conscious, respectful alliance with it.
Okay, so given all these significant risks, the potential for overwhelm, re-traumatization, inflation, the practical challenges, it seems pretty clear that self-directed shadow work isn't for everyone. In many cases, getting professional help isn't just a good idea, it sounds essential. Jung himself expected this to happen within therapy, right?
Absolutely. That's a critical point we need to emphasize. Professional guidance is essential for trauma. If you have a history of significant unresolved trauma, please do not attempt deep shadow work on your own. The risk of re-traumatization is just too high. You need the skills and the safe container provided by a trauma-informed therapist. Also, if you're already dealing with severe mental health challenges of clinical depression, maybe debilitating anxiety, PTSD, or if you're just in a major life crisis and feeling emotionally fragile, it's probably not the right time to start this kind of deep dive independently. You need a certain baseline of emotional resilience first.
So having a relatively stable foundation, a reasonably strong ego, is key before you start digging.
Exactly. Jungian analysts always stress that a stable, relatively healthy ego is a prerequisite for this work. If you lack a coherent sense of self, if your reality testing is shaky, or if you get easily overwhelmed by emotions, a therapist provides crucial support. They act as that safe container needed to hold and process difficult material without you falling apart. And one more sign. If you've been trying self-directed work, but you find yourself feeling stuck, perpetually confused, or if the work is becoming overly self-critical and punitive rather than expansive and healing, that's a clear signal to seek professional help. A good therapist can offer perspective and get you back on a constructive path. Okay, let's try to make this even more concrete. Let's look at how integration actually works with some specific common shadow traits. Remember the core idea. These traits aren't inherently good or bad. They're just raw psychic energy. Integration is like alchemy, transforming that raw energy into something constructive, something life-affirming.
Great. Let's start with the dark shadow. How do we take something that feels like a vice and find the virtue hidden within it? What about something really common, like anger or even rage?
Okay, anger and rage. When it's unintegrated, repressed anger just festers, right? It can come out sideways as passive aggression or suddenly explode in disproportionate outbursts. It can lead to chronic bitterness, resentment, even physical issues like headaches or jaw tension. Often that unacknowledged anger is actually signaling that a boundary has been violated, or a core value is being threatened, or a real need isn't being met. So the integration process starts with acknowledging it, accepting the anger is there without immediately shaming yourself for it. Then explore its roots. Okay, what boundary just got crossed here? What am I needing that I'm not getting? Then you need to find a constructive channel for that powerful energy. Maybe it's physical martial arts, running, hitting a punching bag. Maybe it's channeling it into passionate advocacy for a cause you believe in, or into intense creative work. The ultimate goal isn't to eliminate anger, but to transmute that raw rage into healthy assertiveness. Assertiveness is the psychic fuel you need to set firm boundaries, to say no when you need to, and to pursue your goals with focus and determination. It's anger refined.
That's a really powerful reframing, turning rage into fuel for boundaries. Okay, what about something like envy or jealousy? Those feelings can be really uncomfortable.
There really can be. Envy and jealousy. Unintegrated, these manifest as that corrosive bitterness, resentment, cynicism towards others' success. Maybe judging people who have what you want, secretly wishing they'd fail. It keeps you stuck feeling like you're lacking something. The integration process here, again, starts with acceptance without self-condemnation. Envy is a common human emotion. It actually carries information. Recognize it as a signpost. It's pointing directly towards a quality or an achievement or an experience that you deeply desire but feel you don't have access to. So you ask, what exactly am I envious of in this person? Is their confidence, their freedom, their success in a certain area? Then the crucial next question, okay, how can I start cultivating that specific quality or working towards that kind of achievement in my own life? The goal here is alchemy again, transforming envy into inspiration. The person you envy stops being a source of bitterness and becomes potentially a model. Their success becomes motivation to wake up and develop your own latent potential in that area.
That's brilliant. Using envy as a map to your own desires. Okay, one more common dark shadow trait, that deep-seated feeling of not being good enough. Insecurity, unworthiness.
Ah yes, insecurity and unworthiness. So pervasive. Unintegrated, this shows up as constant feelings of inadequacy, maybe a paralyzing fear of failure, intense perfectionism, people-pleasing tendencies, and inability to set boundaries because you don't feel you deserve to, chronic self-sabotage. It's often deeply rooted in childhood experiences and those negative messages we internalized about our worth. So the integration process here definitely involves tracing the historical roots. When did I first start feeling this way? What messages did I receive about my value as a child? Techniques like externalizing it can help. You can use something like the 3-0-2-1 process. First, describe the feeling of unworthiness in the third person. There's a part of me that feels inadequate. Then talk to it in the second person. You make me feel scared to try new things. Finally, try to embody it. Speak as it in the first person. I am the fear of not being good enough. This helps create distance and understanding. You also need to consciously challenge that harsh, negative, self-critical inner voice. Notice it, question its pronouncements, and deliberately replace it with compassionate self-talk. Ultimately, the antidote to deep unworthiness is radical self-compassion. This means active practices of self-forgiveness, accepting your whole self-perceived flaws and all. The goal is to cultivate an internal, stable sense of self-worth that isn't dependent on external validation or achievements.
Okay, that covers some key dark shadow integration. Now let's shift to reclaiming the golden shadow. You said integrating the dark side is about managing destructive potential, but this is about reclaiming positive, life-enhancing potential. It often gets less attention, but you mentioned it can sometimes be even harder work. Why would embracing positive qualities be harder than facing negative ones? That seems paradoxical.
It does seem paradoxical, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it's a really profound point. Think about it. Facing your dark shadow, your flaws, your anger, that challenges your moral self-image, which is hard enough. But facing your golden shadow, your brilliance, your power, your unique talents, that challenges your fundamental identity. It forces you to potentially step into a bigger version of yourself, to take on more responsibility for your life and your impact on the world. And honestly, it's often more comfortable, safer to believe we're fundamentally flawed or limited than it is to own our true brilliance and the responsibility that comes with it. Owning your light means becoming more visible, leaving the safety of playing small. That can feel incredibly vulnerable, even terrifying.
Wow, that really lands. It's easier to hide than to shine sometimes. So, how do we even spot this hidden gold? If it's unconscious, how do we find it?
Projection is the main key again, but this time, positive projection. Pay really close attention to the people you genuinely admire, maybe even feel a little infatuated with. What specific qualities do you rave about in them? Their effortless confidence, their deep compassion, their incredible creativity, their courage, those qualities you recognize and appreciate so intensely out there. That's almost certainly a reflection of your own disowned potential. The very fact that you can see and value that quality so clearly in someone else is strong evidence that the seed of it exists within you. Otherwise, it wouldn't resonate so strongly. Occasionally, it can even show up via negative triggers, too. If you find yourself getting really irritated by people who seem too happy or excessively passionate or successful, that might be a sign you've repressed your own capacity for joy, passion, or success.
Okay, so we spot it through admiration or maybe even irritation. Then what? How do we actually integrate it? How do we start owning that confidence or creativity we see elsewhere?
It's a process. First step, own the projection. When you catch yourself admiring that quality in someone else, make a conscious effort to turn it inward. Reframe the thought. Instead of, wow, I wish I had her confidence, try thinking or even saying aloud, the confidence I admire in her is a potential within me. You can use I am affirmations here, not as wishful thinking or faking it till you make it, but as a way to start identifying with the trait. I am creative. I am courageous, even if it feels a bit awkward at first. Second, question. Perceived deficiencies. Actively challenge that inner voice that says, oh, I could never be like that, or I don't have that quality. Become a detective searching for evidence to the contrary in your own life story. Find any instance, no matter how small, where you did exhibit a spark of that quality. A time you were brave, a time you had a creative idea, a moment of compassion. Gather your evidence.
So, change the inner story, find the proof points. But that's still internal. Does it require taking action in the world?
Absolutely crucial. Third step, take small embodied risks. Integration isn't just thinking differently, it's being differently. You have to act as if you possess the quality you want to reclaim in small, manageable ways. If you admire creativity but feel blocked, maybe share one small idea in a meeting, even if it feels vulnerable. If you admire confidence, practice speaking up in a low-stakes social setting, just once. These small, repeated actions are like building a new psychological muscle. You strengthen the neural pathways associated with that trait through experience. And finally, underlying all of this, practice self-compassion. Stepping into your own light, owning your power, claiming your talents. It will feel vulnerable. It might feel scary. You're becoming more visible, maybe leaving behind familiar ways of being small. So be incredibly gentle and patient with yourself through this process. Celebrate the small victories. Forgive yourself for the moments of fear or hesitation. It's a courageous act. Now, while these ideas, the shadow integration, have definitely seeped into popular culture, which is great in some ways, it's also led to some simplification, dilution, even misunderstanding. It's important we look at this with a critical eye, too.
Right. So how is shadow work often presented out there in, say, self-help circles compared to the original, deeper Jungian idea? What are the common pitfalls?
Well, a big one is the dilution of depth. You often see shadow work reduced to just like a set of journaler prompts or simple exercises, totally divorced from the rich, complex psychological framework Jung developed. This can trivialize what Jung saw as a potentially perilous, deeply transformative process. It turns it into just another item on the self-improvement checklist, rather than a profound engagement with the unconscious. Another common error is a basic misconception of the shadow itself. Often it gets conflated with just your consciously known negative traits, the things you already know you do that you don't like. But from a strict Jungian view, if you're aware of a trait, it's technically part of your conscious personality or persona, not the shadow proper. The true shadow is, by definition, unconscious. It's the stuff you don't know about yourself. This mistake leads people to focus on just managing known flaws, rather than the deeper, more challenging work of discovering the unknown parts. And as we discussed, the focus is almost always solely on the dark shadow, pretty much ignoring the vital importance of the golden shadow.
And what about the whole do-it-yourself trend? Everyone seems to be a shadow work coach online these days. Is that problematic?
It can be, yes. That's the danger of DIY culture. The internet has fostered this idea that you can, and maybe even should, do deep psychological work, including confronting trauma, all by yourself, often guided by people with little or no formal clinical training. This really encourages delving into potentially volatile, unconscious material without the necessary safety net and skilled guidance, which, as we talked about, risks emotional overwhelm, re-traumatization, or even psychological inflation. We have to remember, Jung designed this work primarily to be undertaken within the secure, supportive container of a therapeutic relationship.
Okay, that's a really important clarification. So for someone listening who's trying to make sense of all this, could you maybe give us a quick snapshot, like Jungian shadow work versus the more popular version, and what are the key differences?
Sure, let's do a quick comparison. Definition. Jungian shadow includes all unconscious aspects, positive and negative. Popular versions often simplify it to just consciously known negative traits or inner demons. Goal. Jungian goals is individuation achieving psychic wholeness, a lifelong process. Popular goals are often more about symptom relief, feeling better, or maybe spiritual leveling up methodology. Jungian relies on in-depth psychotherapy, dream analysis, active imagination. Popular versions use more self-guided tools like journaling, affirmations, simplified online exercises.
Okay, and the role of a therapist?
Therapist role. Seen as essential in the Jungian model for safely navigating potent unconscious forces, often deemed optional or unnecessary in popular approaches. Risks. Jungian psychology fully acknowledges profound, potentially destabilizing risks. Popular versions tend to downplay or ignore these dangers. Integration view. Jungian sees integration as a complex, ongoing, paradoxical process of relationship building with the unconscious. Popular views can sometimes treat it like a project to be completed, or a way to simply eliminate unwanted parts of yourself. Understanding these distinctions is pretty crucial, I think, if you're considering engaging with this work in any form.
That's incredibly helpful. So it really sounds like ultimately shadow work integration isn't some kind of project you finish. It's not like fixing a problem or getting rid of a flaw. It's more like a fundamental way of relating to your own inner life, an ongoing practice that lasts.
Beautifully put, yes. It's absolutely a practice, not a project. There's no finish line where you can say, okay, shadow integrated, done. As you move through life, face new challenges, enter new stages, new layers of the shadow will inevitably emerge, asking for conscious attention. The work is never truly done. It's about cultivating a continuous orientation, a willingness to turn towards the darkness and hidden light within, to listen for their messages, and to keep integrating their energy into an ever-evolving, ever-expanding sense of who you are.
And the ultimate point of this whole often difficult lifelong journey, what's the deepest purpose?
I think the ultimate purpose is to embrace the full, messy, paradoxical spectrum of your own humanity. It's to really own the fact that you are capable of both profound good and real darkness, strength and vulnerability, wisdom and foolishness, all of it. Because trying to live only in the light, only in that curated perfection of the persona, that's ultimately a shallow, one-dimensional way to live. It cuts you off from the deep wells of vitality, creativity, and raw authenticity that reside in the unconscious, in the shadow. The integration of the shadow, as challenging as it is what allows for a life of real depth, genuine meaning, and authentic connection. Connection with your whole self, and through that, deeper connection with others and the world.
Wow. We have certainly taken a deep dive today into Jungian shadow work. We've covered the theory, the foundations, the practical techniques, and really the profound consequences, both good and challenging.
And remember, understanding these hidden parts of yourself, it's not just intellectual gymnastics. It really is a potential map towards greater authenticity, maybe unlocking creativity you didn't know you had, and ultimately building deeper, more meaningful connections with yourself and with the world around you.
So as you go about your day today, maybe just something to ponder. What aspect of yourself, maybe something positive, maybe something negative, might be hiding there in plain sight, just waiting for you to turn around and simply acknowledge it?